Hello, it's Lion here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we're going to be doing a book review or a light novel review. Honestly, I can't remember which one it was. I think it is a book review, even though it does have some elements that are very similar to light novels. So today we'll be looking at Reborn as a Hero, or Reborn a Hero, Asher Merrick by Solomon Ignis, who reached out to me a while back and was nice enough to send me a copy of his book. I appreciate it. It took me forever to read it, but I did eventually do it. And I really did enjoy this book, actually. It was very enjoyable to read. It's self-published through Amazon. And if you follow this creator on his different social medias and stuff, you can see a lot of animations and drawings that relate to this book. And they're going to be not safe for work, so only do that if you're, 18 plus. But his stuff is quite enjoyable, and the work he does and the people that he gets to work with him are all quite good. So, yeah, the demographic for this is adults. Just to, protect myself, I'm going to say that it's adult. Although I guess technically it would be something along the ways of like a 16 plus type book, like a YA book, because a lot of modern YA usually actually caters to adult women, so it has actually a lot more raunchy content than you would really think, right? So, yeah. The genres here are isekai, haremlit, and fantasy. And in terms of adaptation, it does not have one, but it does have animated scenes that have been voiced over by certain people that you can see on his Twitter and stuff like that. So it's not exactly like adapted, but it does have elements of it that are watchable if you're interested in that. Honestly, though, if I was to really get my pick and say like, hey, do I want this animated or do I want this into a comic book or manga? I would prefer a comic book or manga. I think that just works better for me. But I can really see this working in the same way that like the Vox Machina anime kind of works, or the animated series for Vox Machina kind of works, because it kind of has that same vibe to it, which I quite like. So yeah, right off the bat, the rating for this is a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it, but there's some issues with the characterization of the different characters that made me kind of not super, willing to give it like a 5 out of 5, top of the line type score to this. But we'll get to that point when we get to it. So, yeah, the premise here is basically that there's this guy. His name is Asher. He has finished university, and now he's kind of living a kind of lame, kind of down in the dumps type life. He's interacting with his old friend, Anna, I think was her name, and something happens to him, and death comes for him too soon. However, he gets another chance to live in another world thanks to divine intervention, and he is given a divine quest by the god Gathos, the god of the lost and the guider of souls, I guess, something like that. He's kind of like honestly, I didn't think about it until now, but basically Asher Merrick is like a Moon Knight type character, right? Because Moon Knight is the protector of the travelers of the night or something like that. He guides lost people across the night. He defends them from evils. And Asher Merrick basically kind of does the same thing. And Khonshu and Gathos are not very similar, but it kind of has that same vibe, which is pretty cool. I quite like that kind of association that I got, even though it probably has nothing to do with the inspiration for the book, right? So, yeah. In terms of the plot here, Asher dies basically pretty quickly. However, the way that he dies and the situations that occur are very good. So good, in fact, that I think honestly there could be a small novelette or like a novella talking about the situations that led into that hook, and then that came out of that hook after Asher died in the real world, or like in the human world. Because I'm honestly very interested in what the characters that led to Asher's demise kind of had to do, before and after, his death, right? So I would actually really like to see that happening. I'm not really sure that it would really fit with the type of stuff that Solomon Ignis wants to write, so I'm not sure. But that hook was really, really good, and the way that it happened was pretty enticing, and it made me want to continue reading the rest of the book. However, I do think that it was so good, in fact, that maybe it's detrimental that you're that interested in that aspect of the story, because it doesn't really correlate to the rest of the story all that much, which is a bit of a nitpick for me. I'm not really saying it's bad. I'm saying that, it might have been better to make it a simpler hook, because a lot of the time while I was reading, I was like, oh, I want to really know what happened to this girl or to this other person, after the situation, but it doesn't really fit into any of the story, right? So, it is what it is. But, the hook was really, really good. Then he meets the god, Gathos, and he gets isekai'd. You get the basic spiel. You'll have the powers to understand these people. You'll have, this, OP thing and this other OP thing, and you'll get this weapon and this shield and this armor and all of this money, and you're going to have a good life once you find people, to surround yourself with, which is good. He gets sent to this world called Echo Vale, and he gets introduced to the world. He meets his new friends, who are a Goliath named Giza, I guess, and a half-elf called Mara, I think. I'm honestly not sure if she's a half-elf or not. I can't really remember, but she does have pointed ears. So, yeah. He joins up with them. He goes to the city. He joins a guild called the Red Breakers, who actually happen to be the lowest of the low in terms of guilds in the city. And, he gets a quick set of lessons about what it means to be an adventurer, what sort of stuff he needs to do, and how to deal with the situations that occur. And this actually functions mostly to introduce us to secondary characters that become part of the plot line later on, which I think was really well done. It was a very efficient way of telling the story. I think Solomon Ignis is actually a very good writer. It's just that sometimes, the situations happen where, like, you can tell that he's not a super, experienced writer, and, they kind of come and go, mostly in terms of the characters, so we'll get to that here soon, but, Asher gets his lessons, and then eventually they get a mission, and this one is kind of an escort mission. They have this guy who is like some sort of magical geologist or something, or a jeweler, and he gets escorted to another place. They end up interacting with him, and basically this interaction then leads to a reward that then leads to the unraveling of a deeper danger that has to do with the undead that ravaged the city that they're in many years before Asher ever made it to the world, right? So it's pretty good. There's some shenanigans here. And after the end of the escort, there's another big mission that is mostly an espionage type situation that then leads into a big discovery that has our team kind of ruined for a bit, like emotionally, because Asher is not from this world, but he gets attached to these three characters quite quickly, and then these characters then find out this kind of like horrifying reality that they were unaware of, and that brings them down, and Asher gets brought down with them because, well, he's kind of tied to them emotionally, and so it affects him as well, which is pretty interesting. Then time passes for a bit. We get another major mission that's given to them. They get the location, and then they go there, and then there's a big plot twist that's actually pretty good. I wouldn't necessarily say it was like super well set up, but it was pretty enjoyable to read it, so I quite liked it. And then the big battle that leads into the resolution of the story, and that is more or less in broad strokes what the story was about, and it was quite good. Now, moving on to the characters here, we have Asher Merrick, the main character. We have Mara, we have Giza, I don't know how to say her name. We have Uli, Kirsa, and then we have Sal, who is a satyr or a faun. We have this woman called Dawnthorn, and I don't remember if she was human or elf. Then we have this dragonborn character called Vorshund, Mick, and Murin. And mostly the issues that I have with this book are more or less here. First of all, Mara and Asher kind of get it on very quickly in the beginning of the book, and I don't necessarily dislike it because I understand what the purpose of this, is. It's kind of setting the tone for the rest of the novel and for the relationship that these characters have. But the relationship that they develop right before and during the situation that they find themselves in feels like it's something that comes later in the story, but somehow they jump right to it in the beginning. So it's not necessarily an issue of like the intimacy being too quick. It's rather the emotional attachments developed during the intimacy that makes me kind of unhappy because it happens too quickly, in my opinion. It just like they meet each other, they decide that they're useful to each other, and then they decide to, get it on. But the situation doesn't really read like that. It reads like they fall in love immediately and then they decide to show their love physically, right? Which is not really what the story is telling us, right? And then the other major issue here is with Uli, this character. She is a half goblin. She's very cute, actually. I quite like this character a lot. But the way that she's wishy-washy about trust in a way, and the way that she interacts with Asher is very annoying, because it's not clearly like I don't know how to say it. Like, if I don't trust someone, I'm going to be hesitant about the way I interact with them, right? Uli doesn't really demonstrate this at all. She kind of is hesitant initially, then she kind of decides that she's not going to deal with it, and so she goes full in and becomes a friend and lover to Asher, and then suddenly, kind of out of nowhere, she brings up this issue of trust and care again, and then she tries to justify it later by saying that it's because she doesn't want to get hurt emotionally again. But that doesn't really make sense to me, because the scene doesn't really read like that. It kind of reads like she was like, I wouldn't really want to say bipolar or kind of like schizo or anything like that. It doesn't really read like that either. But it reads like she was supposed to be acting one way, and the way that it was written was actually kind of another. Because it's kind of like a switch, right? It's like she's lovey-dovey, and then immediately she's mean, and untrusting of Asher, and then immediately she goes back to loving, but in a sad kind of situation now because of the way that the story is progressing. So I don't really like that, because it wasn't very well done. Mostly it was just not executed that well, and this is something that I've seen quite a few self-published authors kind of dealing with, and not having the best way of kind of illustrating it. But I really don't know how to better illustrate it. I just know that there should be more hesitancy from the character, right? So yeah, and then the final kind of character issue here is that Dawnthorn is unnecessarily coy or mysterious. I don't really know how to word it, but basically there's a situation that occurs with this character, and the way that she's exemplified doesn't really lead people to kind of get to that conclusion, which kind of sucks, because it's a conclusion that the characters in the story do come up, to with like themselves. Like, they figure out this thing, and it feels like, as a reader, I should have also figured out this thing, but I couldn't, because the way that Dawnthorn was developed makes that situation kind of come out of left field for me. And maybe it's a me thing, maybe it's I just didn't read it that well. That's totally possible. But I actually think that it was mostly an issue with the way she was characterized. Like, she's this like badass, very direct, very focused on money kind of lady, which totally works. I find that fine. But whenever she interacted with the characters, it was like impossible to tell what the heck that she was trying to accomplish with her interactions, right? Mostly it was just like Asher decided that he wasn't going to wait, so he would do something, and then she would just kind of go along with it, and that doesn't really work for the type of character that she ends up being at the end of the book. So that's kind of my complaint there, but I really don't know how to voice the complaint properly, if that makes sense. In terms of world building, it's pretty good. There's a lot of mixed races. There's a lot of kind of Renaissance feeling style to the story, as opposed to medieval. It kind of feels a little bit more advanced than that. There's elves, there's goblins, there's Goliaths, which are basically like some sort of orc kind of analog or something. So I looked it up. Apparently these are characters that exist in the D&D kind of systems, but the best way I can describe them is like, if humans are made of clay and elves are related to trees, Goliaths are basically like humans, but they're related to rocks instead of clay, if that makes sense. Like the way that they exist and they come from in these kind of fantasy settings are more from like boulders than clay like humans, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if that makes sense at all, but it makes sense in my mind, right? Because, usually the lore is like humans come from clay, elves share a bond with the trees and stuff like that. And then to kind of figure that in, Goliaths are kind of these like human rock people. And so they would be like humans, but they come from boulders instead of clay, right? So there you go. That's kind of it for that. Other than that, there's also a lot of gods, but most of them don't really end up mattering. The only ones that do is the Goddess of Sleep, Edena or something like that. The one that Kirsa follows, and of course Gathos. And then there's a few other ones that are mentioned, but it's not that important. I do want to say, though, that Asher's kind of respect for all of the different religions is pretty interesting. It's very good, because it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel forced. It feels very natural for this guy to be just like, well, if my God is real, everyone else's is also probably real, so I'm going to be nice to all of them. And that works really nicely. I think that is a pretty good kind of bit of characterization and world building there that I like a lot. In terms of art and fan service, I think the art is pretty good. The covers are nice. The way that the art inside the book is also very nice. And the fan service bits are pretty good. It starts off a bit strong, but then it kind of eases into the situations much better later on in the book. And I quite like them. And there's 4 different characters that Asher Merrick gets it on, and they're all his friends and people that kind of he ends up living with by the end of the book. And it's pretty good. I quite like the way that they interact and the way that the writing for these scenes is done. So overall, pretty good stuff there. In terms of a rating, like I said, this is a 4 out of 5. It's pretty good, but the issues drop it down a point because that characterization thing is a big problem for me. I felt like it was something that I kept thinking about while I was reading because it was just like something that was so jarring to me, right? So there you go. Other than that, it's very, very good. I quite enjoy this, and I really like Solomon Ignis' style. So hopefully I'll reach out to him and I'll see if he can send me the copy of his next book. And I will probably try to review it later on this year because I do have plans to make some sort of like food gourmet manga book kind of theme for the channel at some point, like I do for May and for Sci-Fi May. And I think I want to do that in November since Thanksgiving is kind of a big food holiday. So I'll see if I can get his next book, Slice of Life, sent to me. And if I can, I will review it sometime in November. And that's all there is to that. If you guys are interested in this book or Solomon Ignis's writings and stuff, I will leave a bunch of links down in the not in the comments, down in the description that you guys can check out. And tell him I sent you, review his books, read his books, all of that good stuff. And thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys later.